Hi, this is Karl with another Relax, Focus, Succeed video. And today I have a different kind of video because I want to talk about the job market from both the employers and the employees' perspective. There was recently a story in Forbes about an employer who wanted a job applicant to take a 90-minute test. Test is probably not the right term, but you know what I mean, like a profile thing. And it was in Excel, and it was going to require a certain amount of work and effort. And the applicant, texted back and said, well, can you tell me where I stand? Because I don't really want to put out 90 minutes worth of effort if I don't know where I stand. And the employer came back and said, well, I can tell you where I stand now. Meaning, in other words, that you have lowered yourself because you're not willing to do this. Now, of course, the internet erupts with people who have lots of opinions without very much knowledge, but they start by saying, oh, these Gen Zers, they're so lazy, blah, 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 and these employers, they're so unreasonable, blah, 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 and everybody's got an opinion. But I want to talk about this from a slightly different perspective, and in fact, what I would say is a little bit more perspective. So think about perspective, the long-term view. I'm a huge believer from the perspective of business advisor that you should do business the way you want to do it and find people who want to do business with you. Think about Southwest Airlines. They're very different in many ways than other airlines. If you don't like having to scramble around to hope that you get a decent seat, you're probably not going to fly Southwest very much. If you love being able to say, well, everybody's equal and, first come, first serve, well, then you probably will, right? Some people don't like the kind of coffee they serve at Starbucks. Some people love the kind of coffee they serve at Starbucks. Everybody's different. And so you get to make choices with your dollars and your feet about where you do business. The same is true on the employment market. I've been hiring people for my businesses and other people's businesses for more than 30 years. And I'll tell you, the best approach that I've found is to try to give people a true sense of what it's like to work with you and cut through the crap. And then what happens is that you end up filtering a lot of people because they simply don't apply. That has serious drawbacks. One of the biggest drawbacks we have in IT, which is where I spend most of my time, is that we have very little diversity, and so we don't make people feel as welcome as we could. So if you want more diversity, you have to make a point of asking for more diversity and making sure that people feel welcome to apply. Otherwise, you're just not going to get any result. Now, let's look at this issue from both the employers and the employees' perspective. I'll start with the employer's perspective. It is quite reasonable to have certain requirements, to have tests. To be able to say, look, go run this test. It's a standardized thing. It'll tell me whether or not you're competent with Excel. It'll tell me whether or not you can write a paragraph without, taking an hour and a half to get it done, whether you can actually do work without calling on AI or ChatGPT. Those are reasonable things. But the question is, what's reasonable? Is a 15-minute test reasonable? I think so. Is a half-hour test reasonable? An hour? 90 minutes? At what point does it become unreasonable for people to work hard in order to get this job? Now, part of it has to do with pay. I'll be honest. The toughest job I ever took required multiple interviews over weeks and weeks and weeks with different groups of people from around the country. It was difficult to get this job, but it paid really well, right? And so I was happy to do that because it was worth it. And I never felt like I was being jerked around or that they were putting me through the motions so they could check a box and hire their cousin, right? I was legitimately in the running, and I did get the job, and it was worth it in the long run. From the employer's perspective, having that kind of a gauntlet is how you filter people out to determine whether they have a variety of skills, can work with a variety of people, and can bring certain traits to the job market. That's all legit. But you have to acknowledge there is some line somewhere that is too much for each job. Whether you are looking at the amount of time spent or the skills that you're able to discern, or you're just kind of abusing people to see how much abuse they can take, those are all things employers might choose to measure. But remember, everything you do in that piece of the job, interview is going to be reflected in how you are seen as an employer in the long run. I'm going to put a link to a blog post I wrote many years ago, and it's been updated several times. But it talks about how I use filters in my job applications. In particular, I have certain things that I do that if you're not willing to jump through these hoops, well, you're just not going to get a job. On the technical side, I've had people take tests to see if they have certain skills with regard to programming or, just being able to use simple office products. I've also had people submit writing samples because I need to know that they can actually write a paragraph or two and, describe how their brain works. I've sent people home with what I call homework that they send to me. And all of those things have divided people. People who are not willing to do that simply don't come back. Now, I never asked somebody to do something that was going to take 90 minutes or an hour or even half an hour. I think what I asked for should be done in 10, 15 minutes. So I was trying to be reasonable, but still get to the core of whether or not they had the aptitude for the job. But I have to say, as an employer, there's kind of this bar that you set. And it may be, from the employer's perspective, that if somebody is willing to take a little bit of abuse, that's the employee they're looking for, right? If somebody's willing to do unreasonable things, that might be the employee you want. Now, it's completely separate whether or not that's a moral thing to do or whether you want to take a job with those people. But from the employer's perspective, those things create a bar, and people who are willing to climb over the bar will be considered, and people who are not willing to climb over the bar are not going to be considered, right? So, the question is, what's reasonable and what's good to do as an employer, as a human being? I will note, my ads also went out of their way to do a couple of things. One is, they're written in a way that I want to make sure that people have a sense of humor. If people get, the fact that I say, well, if you can throw this word into your response, that would be great. And it's an unusual word, but if they do it, I know that they paid attention to the details, and I know that they get that I'm a little bit weird. And I kind of want to work with people who are okay with working with somebody who's a little bit weird. But unlike Tony Hsieh and Zappos, I'm not actually going to have be a little bit weird as one of my criteria. Tony Hsieh did that, and Zappos has benefited from it ever since. But it's okay to have those sorts of things in there. So I would have a little bit of sense of humor. I would also send people home with the homework, and I was just different enough that my ad actually stood out. So if people wanted to send me a blank resume that they're using to blast the entire universe, well, I wasn't going to interview them, and they were never going to have a chance because they're not following my very simple instructions to be a little bit different. Now, my goal in doing this is to have people eliminate themselves from the process. With regard to diversity, I recently, 3 years ago, I added to my ads a little line that says, if you are willing and able and interested in working with a wide variety of people from all over the world, please apply for this job. I wanted to make sure that people who might be turned off by technology, might be turned off by, the writing world, the world of literature, the world of technology. Certain people might have eliminated themselves, but I want to make sure that they know they're welcome here and it's okay to apply, and I want them to apply. So some of the questions eliminated people, some of the questions brought people in who might not otherwise have applied. The bottom line is, if you're an employer, be yourself. Make sure that your ad and your process and your requirements reflect what it's like to work in your company. Don't lie to people and lure them in and then give them a different job. They're just going to leave, right? Be honest. Be honest if you expect people to work weekends on short notice. Be honest if you want people to take a little bit of pushing and not just slide by. Be honest if you have biases against young people, right? Be honest to the extent you can within the law about who you are and who you want to hire and who you want to have work with you. And that way you eliminate a lot of BS and filtering at the beginning. All right, let's take a look at this from the employee's perspective. First of all, going in, are you actually qualified for the job? Statistics show us that men will apply for a job if they have 60 to 70% of the qualifications. Women will apply for a job if they have 90 to 100% of the qualifications. So think about the jobs you're applying for and whether or not you are willing to go ahead and learn some things that you might not have learned or might not know at the outset. But go through and don't over-filter the jobs, but also think about what you want. Are you willing to work weekends? Do you put a premium on work-life balance, or do you put a premium on learning new skills and moving up the ladder? A lot of people have this mental attitude that's, let's talk about it in a different video, but they have this attitude that they will work hard for 10 or 15 years and do anything and everything it takes to climb up the ladder. And so they've got a strong base of salary that's way as high as they could possibly make it. So by the time that they're 30 or 35, they're up here and everybody else in their cohort is down here. And then they're going to suddenly and magically have work-life balance. If you believe that, then that's what you should do. But you should be conscious of your belief and know that it filters which jobs you will apply for. I have had people in the first interview, tell me, I need Thursdays off, or my religion doesn't let me work on Fridays or Saturdays, or I have to do this or I have to do that at the interview. Now, in my case, I'm very flexible, so I didn't really care, but some employers do. And putting it out there right up front allows people to filter appropriately without being discriminating because of your religion, right? If I need somebody on Saturday and you can't work on Saturday, I'm sorry, it's just not a reasonable accommodation. Ultimately, never forget that how you are treated before you are hired is a great indication of how you will be treated after you're hired. So if you go in and it feels a little uncomfortable, but you really need a job, you have to know that you are giving up something that you wanted or something that you believed in order to get that job. So be aware of what you're giving up as you go through the process. And remember, ultimately, the things that are most important to you have to be prioritized at the beginning. So guess what? The advice at the end for employees is exactly the same. You be you. Be yourself. Be as honest as possible and don't give in. Don't say, oh, well, I'll work a few weekends for now, but you'll see in a few years I'll work my way up and I'll never be asked to work a weekend again. No. I always say, other people you can't control, right? You can control yourself. You can control the information you put out there. So go into the process as an employer or an employee being as honest as possible. This is a little like when you're trying to find a client or, to be honest, when you're trying to find a date. If you misrepresent yourself as an employer or an employee, well, you're kind of mucking up the works, right? If you misrepresent yourself at the beginning and then later on you say, oh, wait a minute, they turned out to be completely different than that, what the heck, right? It's not going to work, and I should have known that at the beginning. Well, it works better if everybody's as honest as possible about what you expect. And to be honest, I would tell you this with regard to everything going on social media. Ignore all of the crap that people put out there. So many people read the news and they filter it with their biases before they have one word to say about it. You be you. You lead your life. You hire who you want to hire. You apply for the jobs you want to apply for, but be completely honest about who you are and what you want. And you'll save a lot of trouble in the long run. This advice also works for dating. Let me just put that out there. The bottom line is priority, priority, priority. What is important to you in getting a job? What are you willing to give? What are you willing to get? And same goes for hiring. If you're looking for an employee, what are you willing to give and what do you want to get, right? And you got to balance all those things. So try not to be overwhelmed by the biases. If your first reaction is, that employer is a son of a bitch, or that employee is lazy, right? You have to squish that down a bit and say, okay, what are they really looking for? And would I be happy working there? One of the easiest things as an employee is to go into the office and literally look around and say, do these people look happy? Do they seem to actually enjoy working together? And would I be happy if I was in this office? In the same way, when you're interviewing people, would they be a good fit with your team? Now, the way I run my business is very, very specific. I want a cozy, friendly environment. I want people to actually like each other. I want my employees to go on barbecues together and go to each other's birthday parties and that kind of stuff. I want us to have a sense of humor, and I want us to work really hard, but I want everybody to have work-life balance. That's me. Those are my biases. Not everybody has those biases. Many, many people, employers and employees, are hyper-focused on the money, hyper-focused on where they are in their jobs and so forth. The bottom line is this. If you are lucky in the 2020s, you will find you'll find a match that will last 4 or 5 years. If you're hiring, a great employee will last 3 to 5 years. If you're looking for a job, a great employer might last 3 to 5 years. And maybe it'll last longer, and if you get to 5, you might get to 10. But be realistic. The next job is not a career that will last for the next 30 years. It's just not. The job that you're going to have 10 years from now doesn't exist today. The technology you'll be using doesn't exist. The people you work with are probably not in that business because it doesn't exist. Right? So you have to have a flexible view of the future and think in terms of, what am I committing to, and can I do this, and is this the right balance of all the things that are in my priority list for the next 3 to 5 years? And go into it with an open mind and make sure that you're as honest as possible. You cannot be responsible for the honesty of the other party. You can only handle your side of the equation. I'm welcome to have any feedback you have. Put your comments down below. Please don't abuse me too much if you can avoid it, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have. For Relax, Focus, Succeed, this is Karl Palachuk, wishing you the best of luck in everything you do.